Hey guys, welcome to Startup Mindset. Today I'm talking with Ali Binazir, who's a speaker, author, and happiness engineer. And we'll be talking about his mission to help people live a meaningful, fulfilling, and flourishing life. Ali, so good to have you.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with your work around helping people discover and cultivate superpowers that they might not know they have.
Superpower movies are super popular these days. You know, you got Aquaman, you got Captain Marvel, you've got Avengers and all that stuff. And people think that those people they can melt rocks with beams from their eyes. I can't do that. But the fact is that we have access to many superpowers that we just kind of forget to cultivate. And my job is to remind people that they have the potential to do that and to give them the tools to actually develop those superpowers. So for example, if you're a good public speaker, you can be, say, a junior senator from Illinois and go up and, run for your Senate and win a seat and go off and give a couple of speeches and then become president. That's the story of Abraham Lincoln. I know you guys thought that was Obama, huh? It's actually Lincoln. But it's also the story of Barack Obama. And here's this guy who has less experience than all the other candidates, but because he was a great orator, he was able to achieve the highest office in the land. And likewise, with all of us, we have these hinge moments, I call them. Hinge moments are these moments in your life when you things can go either one way, which is kind of okay, or another, which is like really great. So when you're talking to a boss and you want to get a raise, well, if you do a good job of that, then you get a raise, get a promotion, then trajectory goes this way. If you have a startup and you want to raise some money, get in front of a panel of investors, then if you do a good job of that presentation, you could potentially score $1 million and create the next Google. So the point is, these superpowers can help you have a life trajectory that's significantly higher and more interesting than they would be without them.
So one of them you mentioned is public speaking.
That's correct, yeah.
What are some other things? Maybe 2 or 3 other superpowers?
So I think public speaking is definitely one of them. And with that comes charisma. So charisma is the skill of just being a more empowered person and being able to gather people around and being more persuasive around them. And that's kind of a meta skill. It's a skill that empowers all your other skills. So if you're a more charismatic person, things in general are going to go better. And I also think of happiness, kind of a superpower as well. The idea of being able to think and feel independent of circumstance. So you can put yourself on a track of greater fulfillment and flourishing for all of your life. And I've noticed with a lot of friends who are like super successful and affluent and educated, they have everything, but they're generally kind of not all that happy. They're really good at self-inflicted misery, but not so good at the happiness. And I think that's like a big missing part of our education. It's like, why aren't we teaching kids how to relate to other human beings, which is a big part of happiness, how to get good sleep, how to regulate their diet and exercise such that it's optimized for health and well-being. So all these things are superpowers that are accessible to us, and yet somehow they were missing from our education because somebody was teaching me, at Harvard, oh yeah, you gotta learn Japanese history, and all I remember from that is like 1868 Meiji Restoration, which sounds like some Japanese restaurant that I've never been to. But these things are important too, and I'm hoping to disseminate this information more widely so people learn them and use them so they can be happier and healthier.
Right, and so speaking of that, you do speak a lot about the things that you think should be taught in school but are not.
Yeah.
So I guess you addressed that a little bit already, and then maybe can you dive a little bit more into some more things in terms of our education?
So I think one of the most important skills to have in life is the ability to relate to other human beings. So I wrote a series of books called The Tao of Dating, and they're all about, okay, you're interested in someone, how do you initiate that conversation? How do you get someone to be more interested in you rather than less? How do you engineer such that a first date happens, a second date happens? So all these things, these are skills, and most people go about it through trial and error. Mom didn't teach us, dad didn't teach us, school didn't teach us, and so if you know what to do, there's a much better chance that thing will go well. And what's more important than relationships? Turns out science says that relationships are the #1 contributor to your overall long-term health, well-being, happiness, everything. So that's kind of the crux of the matter, and it gets completely ignored by the educational system. So we already talked about happiness, but also persuasion. So persuasion is a skill. So how do you convince people to do stuff for you or with you, right? Collaboration. Anybody who's succeeded in a big way in the world has done it with the help of other people. So how do you get people signed on to your cause? How do you persuade yourself? How do you get yourself to do stuff, right? So there's an internal voice. How do you speak to that internal voice? How do you tune it such that you can do things better? So for example, one of my own tricks is that let's say there's some chore that's really not that fun to do, right? So it's an onerous chore and I'm thinking, oh God, I need to do that, or I must do that, right? But it turns out there's a hierarchy of these things called modal operators that make it easier on your mind to accept something. So when you say, I have to or I must, that's really hard, right? If you say I should, that's a little easier. I could, that gets a little easier. But then if you say, I get to do this, you're like, whoa, it's completely different, right? So for example, oh, I should go to the gym. Oh, I could go to the gym. I want to go to the gym. Oh, I get to go to the gym, right? So suddenly when you
it's like a privilege.
Absolutely. When you phrase it in terms of I get to go, that means it's fun, it's a privilege, and holy shit, you ingrate, why aren't you going to the gym? This is like the best thing that could happen. So, for example, I get to drive home on the freeway, right? As opposed to, oh God, I need to drive home on the freeway, there's traffic. So all these things, you do these little tweaks inside your mind and you can be more persuasive with you.
And engineer just more happiness for yourself, even just in daily life, like in a commute, for example.
Yeah, instead of grinding your own gears, suddenly it's like flow, suddenly it's much easier.
All right, and so a lot of the things you mentioned so far, and especially when you're saying how you have a lot of friends and you know a lot of people who have amazing careers, as an outsider you might look at them and say, hey, you're affluent, you have amazing careers, you're doing well in life, and yet you're not happy. And you went through something like that yourself in life. I mean, somebody who is a medical doctor, who was a consultant at McKinsey, a high-paying job, etc., and you found yourself not happy, and then you went on this journey of sort of, I guess, discovery and rediscovery. So can you share that with our audience today?
Yeah, actually, I haven't really spoken about that much in the past. I was a consultant at McKinsey and Company, that's what I call it, for about a year. And it's funny because here you are and salary's big. Everybody's like, oh wow, that's so great, man, you got the job. It's like one of the most coveted jobs in the nation. And you're with smart people and the perks are good and you're thinking, oh, I should be happy now. In the meantime, they treat you like dirt. I mean, basically if you're a consultant, you're a cog and you are in service to whatever the client's whim happens to be, and they treat you like that. And after a while, you're like, oh, I kind of feel like a cog. And in my case, there was also some shady ethics going on, and I was like, huh, is that normal? And finally, when I gathered the courage to leave, I realized, oh wow, my life is actually better without this. And that was the transition point when I started my business of writing and consulting and doing seminars. And the distinction between the menu and the food is a very important one. So for example, working at Fancy Job for me was a menu. It's like, oh wow, look at all these great things on here and it looks really tasty. But if you're hungry and all you have is a menu, you're gonna remain hungry for a very long time because those menus, they're chewy and a lot of fiber, but not a whole lot of nutrition, not a whole lot of calories. So what do? You decide, okay, what is my fulfillment? And fulfillment is a set of feelings. It's not a checklist. It's not a person, it's not a particular job, it's a set of feelings. So you have to ask yourself, is this profession actually fulfilling to me? And on this book that I'm working on called Happiness Engineering, what I figured out is that there are two aspects of a job that make it truly fulfilling. One is service. Is it service oriented? Do you feel like you are making other people's lives better, right? So if you're some kind of investment banker and all you're dealing with is columns of numbers as you're flipping around, it's hard to kind of see where the service is in there. Whereas if you're a school teacher and you see the smile on the faces of the kids as they learn something, it's very easy to see. Or if you're a doctor, right? And the other one is purpose. It's like, okay, is this thing that I'm doing building something? Is it something that's meaningful to me? Does it have meaning and purpose for me? And it turns out that depending on who you ask, between 78 and 81% of Americans say their jobs lack meaning and purpose. And so they're kind of miserable. They commute to the job, they punch a card, they get a paycheck, they come home and they live for the weekend. And what if you actually enjoyed those 40 to 50 hours a week that you were doing this thing that pays you, right? What if that was actually meaningful to you? And the good news is that these days we have a lot of latitude, and there's a lot of entrepreneurship, and there's a lot of ways of creating businesses that really do involve meaning, purpose, and service. And so wherever you are right now, you can be doing something else that's much more meaningful in about a year or two, right? Whereas if you don't start right now, who knows, the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years you may be doing. So I started out in medical school, and very quickly I realized that it was not a good match for me. So for a lot of people out there, medicine's a great profession, and it's a service profession. But for me, it just wasn't the intellectual engagement I was looking for. There are aspects of it that were repetitive as opposed to creative, and I'm much more of a creative person. So I thought, okay, better 4 years than 40, sayonara, I'm out of here. Whereas for somebody else, that might be a dream job. So it's important to find that fit between your temperament, your mentality, the thing that makes you happy, and the kind of profession that you want to invest your whole life in, because you don't get to replay this. This is it. You get one shot. No control experiment, no redo. This is it.
And the interesting thing to consider is also, it's like you're not just doing it for your intrinsic happiness and well-being, but you can also think of it as like in some ways you kind of owe it to the world.
Absolutely.
To find what you're great at, because and give it, right?
Yeah,
give it to the world, because we won a lottery ticket, life. It is.
Hallelujah! Go life!
Go life. It's really special, and so it's not only like it's important for us to kind of engineer a life of happiness for ourselves and a career path that leads to meaning and purpose, but it's also important to just like share what's in us with the world and contribute.
That's great. It reminds me of two things. So first of all is that, what is our purpose on this planet Earth? What is life? Well, basically there is no purpose, so you make one up, and you make the game up, and the game is that you have a gift to give. And what is that gift? So first is to find that gift, and then is just give it fully, like that book we both read, The Great Work of Your Life by Stephen Cope. Fantastic book.
Great book to add to your reading list if you haven't read it already.
So and every minute that you're not giving your gift fully is a minute wasted not giving your gift, right? And as a simple rubric, if you're working for someone, you're generally helping that person fulfill their dream, right? Whereas when you're working for yourself, you're working to fulfill your dream. So, sit down with yourself and say, hey, whose dream do I want to be fulfilling? Whose gift do I want to be giving? So maybe you work in an institution that you really, really like, and it's right on your mission, and that works. The second aspect that I wanted to touch upon, which you hit at, which is great, is the work of Nick Christakis and Jamie Fowler about us as humans being embedded in these extended networks. So they studied these people that they had records on for like 30, 40 years, part of the Framingham study. And what they found was that when one person changed their behavior, it became much more likely for people in their network to change their behavior too. So for example, if one person was obese, it was 35% more likely that their first degree friends were also obese. And it was 17% more likely that second degree friends, and like 8%, so it's like boom, boom, it just propagates through the whole network. One person quit smoking, it's like 50% chance that the neighbors, that their immediate friends quit smoking. So the point is that we're all nodes embedded in these vast networks of mutuality.
So it's not selfish when you're when you're trying to improve your diet or your exercising routine. You're actually improving your network well-being.
So when you work on yourself, when you improve your own life, when you make yourself happier and healthier, that is the most unselfish thing you can do, because that propagates throughout the network. And you kind of set an example. It's like, oh, so-and-so, dropped 20 pounds, got checked out for sleep apnea, has a CPAP machine, is sleeping better, got their job kind of squared away. Hey, if he can do it, I can do it. I mean, that's how I work too. If I ever want to go bungee jumping, I watch the first person do it. I'm like, oh, didn't die. Okay, I guess I can do that too, right? So, and that's the same way I started my business. I saw a friend start a business. I'm like, okay, I can do that. So when you set an example of greatness and living fully and being a happy, healthy, positive person, then that just propagates throughout the whole world.
So now let's turn to your webinar. You're working on a webinar on super charisma.
That's correct. So it's an online course and a webinar. It's called Super Charisma, How to Be a Compelling Speaker. And the idea is that you have these three qualities, namely strength, warmth, and presence, and you want to be conveying them through three channels, namely the visual channel, this magnificence you see right here, the vocal channel, the sound of your sonorous voice, and the verbal channel, the actual words that you use. So how do you do that? So that's 3 things, 3 channels, that's 9 different areas that you can work on. And how do you do that to optimize your message? How do you convey it so it has the impact that you want it to have? And then there's an advanced super charisma as well. Once people go through the first course, then you open up the second course, which is all the advanced ways you can do that even more skillfully. And I'm also trained as a hypnotherapist and stage hypnotist, so there are ways of actually entrancing your audience. So they're just hanging on every word and they're waiting for the next thing that happens. And this can be a useful skill if you happen to be giving a presentation or giving a speech, or trying to raise money, or you're presenting to a judge. Whatever it is you're doing, whenever you're speaking, unless you're one of those crazy people who likes to talk to the mirror by themselves, you're always speaking in public. So public speaking is on all the time.
This is wonderful, super useful to our viewers watching this series on Startup Mindset who are entrepreneurs. And so where can they find this webinar?
Yeah, so if you go to happinessengineering.com, there will be links to that. And it'll be starting in March 2019, which happens to be right about now.
Wow.
So a couple of weeks,
Incredible. And then I'll make sure that there's a link below in the description as well. So what are some tips that people can expect to learn from this webinar?
Yeah, actually, a lot of my clients are entrepreneurs. So I deal with entrepreneurs, and my colleagues, they deal with politicians on the East Coast. And what you want to be conveying is strength and warmth, and then presence. And strength is probably the most important one. When people encounter one another, they're within milliseconds assessing whether this person is competent, namely strength, and also friendly. Is this person on my side? And that's warmth. So one of the most useful ways of conveying strength is by taking up more space. So you want to sit by taking up more space. You want to have expansive hand gestures, and I feel like the best way to convey this is by the contrast. It's like when people shrink and they like bend their neck and stuff. So these are submission gestures, right? It's when you expose your neck.
Or like do this.
Yeah, exactly. Touching yourself.
Arms.
So that
touching a neck.
Exactly. So what you want to do instead is to take up space and have expansive gestures. And you notice how my voice also changes when I do that. So you want to have a sonorous voice that comes all the way down from below, from your diaphragm, as opposed to this high, reedy voice that comes from up here, which really irritates everybody who listens to it. Yeah, it doesn't take that long to irritate people, right? You can always see you're cringing, like, stop that, make that stop. So
you want to have cringing.
So the voice, the warmth, and the strength comes from having it sonorous, coming from down below. Your body, you want to keep it big, make expansive gestures. And if you pay attention to that, just that will already make a big difference in how you present yourself. And of course, posture is very important too. So if I just slump over like this, that's a low power gesture. That's particularly important because this also happens to be exactly the posture that people spend like 9 hours a day looking at their phone, right? So recognize that,
especially these days, looking at phones.
Looking at your phone is the ultimate low power gesture. It can actually make you depressed, because this is the pose of depression, right? Whereas if you take that away, open up, and look up with your chin level, look how much more power you have.
So something I did, and would you suggest that that's a good technique, is growing up, I did a lot of ballet and modern dance, and there are a lot of options usually for adult dance classes as well. Is it something that you would say is useful?
Absolutely.
At any age?
So any practice that gets you inside your body will give you more presence. So presence is that third quality, that kind of elusive, magical thing. What is presence? But the idea is being able to feel yourself in your body, and such that your audience can feel you too. Because if you can't feel you, they can't feel you. But you are the one leading, so you go first. And if you do ballet, if you do gymnastics, if you do any kind of sport, proprioception is important, being able to know where your limbs are in space and actually feeling it. So my first level tip for having more presence is wiggle your toes and feel your feet. So you do that, like, oh, I have feet, and then let that feeling kind of move up your body such that, oh, I have ankles, I have shin, I have knee, I have leg, oh, I have a whole body, right? And now when you're moving, people actually feel you.
You feel like you're filling it out, like you're filling out the space.
Yeah. So one of the biggest lessons of my course is the whole idea of the pre-talk routine, in which you do all these things. You work on the voice, you work on the posture, you work on the feeling grounded and rooted and actually in your body. So when you step on stage, that's already there. You don't have to think about it. It's already built in.
That's awesome. It's like that's like what you should be doing right now, like before going into an investor pitch or on stage, like for a talk.
Absolutely.
That's wonderful. So we've already learned a lot from you, and you're really interesting, and that's why I would like to actually turn to this rapid fire question series.
Rapid fire. Do we have a fire extinguisher around here? I mean, this sounds dangerous. Okay.
I'm sure there's one in the hall.
Okay.
What are one or two of your favorite books?
Well, my two favorite books of all time, very easy. So one of them is Behave, The Biology of Humans at Our Best and Worst, which is extraordinary. I mean, it's a break, but a very worthwhile break, and one you should chew through very, very slowly. Did you not read this recently?
Yeah, I just recently finished it.
And just for curiosity, how long did it take you?
2 months?
2 months. I mean, this is no joke, right? This is a serious book, but extremely rewarding, amazing. So the other one is called The Making of the Hydrogen Bomb by Richard Rhodes, and it won every award known to man. It won the Pulitzer, won the National Book Award, I mean everything, right? And that's even brickier than this break. So it's like 1,000 pages. It took me like 6 months to get through. So that is amazing. It's a history of the development of the atomic bomb, the Manhattan Project, but also character sketches of like the 60 people who were involved in it, and then an entire history of the US and Europe from like 1915, the start of World War I, all the way until like the present day. It's insane. So it's amazing. So these are two of my favorite books.
Who are your intellectual heroes?
Intellectual heroes. So recently I've been reading up on John von Neumann, so he's definitely one of my intellectual heroes. He could solve any problem, and he was part of the Manhattan Project, one of the people featured in the atomic bomb book. And he also just developed game theory, out of air. He's like, oh, I think I'm just gonna develop this new field. And he kind of developed computer programming and was part of a team that created the first like actual computer, and just total super genius, and yeah, amazing guy. And of course, Robert Sapolsky also, just all the work that he does, and the way he's able to convey it so lucidly. I consider him to be the best lecturer alive. So any chance you have to watch him on YouTube or watch him live, you should definitely do that.
What are a few things you would say to a younger self? Let's say you in your 20s.
Me in my 20s. In my 20s, gosh, the problem is me in my 20s wouldn't listen to me, so that was part of the problem.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say listen to wiser, older people a little bit more. It's actually a good way of thinking about it. And also, if I knew then what I know now, I would have said, don't go to Big Sky, Montana, because that's where you're going to have this insane ski accident and like break your body. So yeah.
Okay. How many hats do you own?
How many hats do I own? Let me think. Counting baseball caps, and actually probably around like 6 or 7. Yeah, not that many. I usually just wear a hat until it dies, and then the next hat.
Are you optimistic about a future?
Optimistic. I think there is no choice but to be an optimist. It's also good to be fully present in the moment. So optimism implies a certain projection out into the future, and at any moment in time, everything's pretty much okay. There are no problems in the absolute right now. So a mixture of being fully present plus mild optimism.
Okay, wonderful. And so I guess before we wrap up, since we have, our audience watching this Startup Mindset series, who are a lot of them are entrepreneurs, what are maybe 1 or 2 final remarks you would share with them?
The ultimate superpower is control over your own mind. So meditate, get started. I don't care how you do it. Start the Calm app, start the Headspace app, whatever it is, just get started, because the power to be able to direct your mind the way you want it to go, as opposed to the way circumstances want it to go, or as opposed to the way somebody else wants it to go, is the ultimate power you have as a grown-up. So meditate.
Okay, wonderful. Ali, well, thank you so much for sharing your tips on how to lead a happy, fulfilling, flourishing life.
Thank you.
I learned a lot, and I hope the audience enjoyed this as well. And if you did, please make sure to like this video. And also, if you haven't already, subscribe to the Voxel Studios channel and make sure to enable notification. See you next time, guys. Woo.
Good times.
Woo.
All right.
Cause clearly you can see the signs when everyone knows ignore the strongest part of your own mind. You wanna cease it, cause you need it, but you're drifting off the shore.